Appreciate you all being here. We are going to kick off here in just a second. Today, we're just talking about bringing a virtual production to life. I'm assuming probably everyone knows, at least to some degree, what a virtual production is, but I mean, it can vary in its complexity, but for the purposes of this shoot, it's talking through how camera tracking works with an Unreal environment on an LED wall, and just we're going to talk through all the fun, the possibilities, constraints, frustrations, beauty, magic, and all that kind of stuff that virtual production can bring. So with me today is DP and contrast visuals. Is that the technical, like, contrast visuals, right? Owner sure. Nathan Thompson.
Contrast, whichever.
And we have Amanda over here, Alberto. Is that we did that right too? Who is our art director on this piece. Broad strokes, this was a piece that Gear 7 did in partnership with Caraway pans, cookware, and I'll kind of, to go through the early part of this, I'll just walk you through a little bit of how Gear 7 got involved in this, how we, ended up in this crazy place where we were using robotics on tabletop with Unreal environment and, just making things real hard on ourselves unnecessarily. But hopefully the end product was worth it. But yeah, so we, at Gear 7, we've had the studio, Arc Studios, built, and we have been thinking through just all the different capabilities with robotics and Unreal Engine and in-camera visual effects. And so we started to think through, like, what was an application of this technology that would kind of show off the full suite of possibilities with motion control and all these things. And so the idea was it would make sense to do a tabletop piece because that just lends itself to repeatable motions. And what if we put it, why would you do a tabletop piece in an Unreal environment was kind of the big challenge. What would be the benefit? And it was like, well, what if there was a kitchen that couldn't possibly exist really in the real world? I mean, I guess you could build this, but it would, it's obviously not a kitchen you're used to walking into. You can see a little bit of that imagery here. So we got in touch with Cody Garrow and Knitted City, and Cody's here today. So huge shout out to him and his team because they built, based on just our early conversations about what an environment could look like that you obviously would want to build virtually rather than practically. And adding another layer to that, we started to think through, okay, we really they already had a partnership or like a working relationship with Caraway pans, and they started talking through all the different color swatches they have and all these different SKUs, and it was like, well, what if the motion control then took you through all of the different SKUs and we could seamlessly cut through all these different colors of pans? And then another advantage became very apparent with virtual production. It was like, well, what if the environment changed to match? So that's kind of how we got a little bit off to the races here. We put together some conceptual mood boards and things like that to start thinking through what that might look like, what it might feel like. And until shoot day, completely unsure if it would actually work or not. So anyway, early on, we just started digging into what the shot list would look like. And for some reason, I don't feel like I really have an affinity for oneers, but I keep writing things that play like oneers. So that's the way we kind of saw this, is that it would move from one piece of motion to the next, and there would be cuts, but it would kind of be hidden. We'd use speed ramping and things like that, and there were some other creative
elements. I didn't believe this was going to work.
Yes.
I wasn't sure, at least. The jury was out.
Very, very typical, like, director comes in with hot with something like that, and the DP's like, sure, man. Like, I'll make sure I shoot enough to get you out of that. So anyway, that was just the early conceptual framework, but the other way that we, I almost felt bad when I first contacted Amanda because we started thinking through art direction. It was a very unintended consequence of building a world that was so outside of the norm, but then you had to art it with things that could exist in the real world. And so we hit up Amanda, and I was like, I don't really know. Here's the environment. We need your help desperately.
It's so modern, it doesn't exist.
Yes. So, I guess I know some of the things you went through because we were in a good bit of communication, but talk through a little bit of just, the importance of art in virtual production. As it turns out, it's pretty well essential to make those worlds seamlessly blend. So you're given that task with very little to work with in terms of real elements that you can source in the real world. Mm-hmm. What was it like trying to pull this together for this super odd, like ethereal world?
I guess for this one, in shooting on any virtual wall, having the like actual physical elements is really important to sell what you're doing here. In this case, it was a little bit more interesting because, like you said, it was placed in we were like looking into the living room, which is first off odd for a kitchen shot. And so to come up with ideas of like what would be in between the living room and the kitchen. And then also the idea that we wanted it to change colors. So rather than, having 6 different colors of a shelf, what type of material can we get that might reflect the light that we're changing into or soak it up or soak through? So we went with a lot of like chrome, transparent acrylic things, and white, just to test it out. And we actually ended up using like 1 piece of each. And it was super minimal. The picture, the image was very, very minimal. So the props were very minimal, which made it easy. And it was just more a matter of what can I find that looks futuristic, which is like curved. So anything that was like curved, no sharp edges, was the way to go. And a little bit like a shelf that could hold a little bit of our product, since that was what we were shooting. A tree that could sell the gag of the trees in the background. And then my favorite part was once I got the physical props in place, I went to Justin and we got to move the little props in the image, which is so cool. Yep. So I moved the tree, 3 inches forward and moved that tree 3 inches back. So
yeah, you actually got to art direct the virtual space,
yeah.
And Justin was our kind of Unreal op. He was the master of the virtual world, and I mean did a lot of wonderful things in terms of even just moving light, moving fixtures, really optimizing that world for the shoot. But I should mention, I kind of skipped a key part. Caraway actually did come in as a partner as we were pitching this idea. We sent them the treatment and all that. So, and as it applies to Amanda's world, the word that kept coming up was minimal, minimal, minimal. And a lot of times that actually is the last thing you want to hear with a virtual world, because art plays such a huge role in trying to bring a second layer of your image.
Right.
Like you have your subject and then you have your second layer, which is typically your art. And that hopefully just lets almost the virtual world become like the old school, like painted backgrounds that they used to do in Hollywood sets and stuff. It's meant to just be that last third layer. So it made me a little nervous to know that we weren't going to be able to put major set pieces in place to create that, because it's so hard to blend those worlds if you don't have something pretty definitive cutting off that physical to virtual world.
And for how minimal we kept it, we brought in like a ton of props just in case, like you just have to have like all the options. So we had a ton, but ended up, just using minimal. So yeah, definitely helped.
And as if that wasn't enough, I mean, we did have some of the elements, some of the cookware to work with. You put the tea kettle in the background, some of their, for lack of a better term, Tupperware, I guess is their travel stuff. But then there was the continuity aspect. So we're trying to do all these motion controlled movements where we're gonna swap out different colors of pans, and it all has to look exactly the same.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that was an interesting piece too. So we had the product from Caraway, and me and my art team set up all the sections of the colors so that we could quickly run in, switch all the pans, and run back out. So my lovely assistant Janae and David were super helpful. Obviously with art, you gotta be quick. So as quick as we could get all this stuff in and out, but like he's mentioned, the most important part was the continuity. So, Kirk would get the robot into place, and we'd get a screenshot, an overlay over the live view of where the pots were originally put. And David would hold the screen for me and inch them right into place and, make sure that every single shot they were in the exact same place. Because for each shot, Callie, our cook, who was the talent on set, was moving them around a little bit. So they all got moved, or they all had to be swapped for a new color. So it was like a quick race to like, how quickly can we make everything exactly the same? And like Janae would run in the background and mark the prop and pick it up and drop it in the exact same spot. So it was interesting. It was a fun little race.
Yeah, that was one of the really fun workflows between camera department and art department. That like at first I started, we had wireless monitors, which left us untethered to really get like right next to the product. That was amazing. And then Kirk would take the robot to like one master overhead that always grounded us in, okay, here's we can see every pan, and it's a good angle to be able to like always match. And so initially I was starting to do that, and I'd be like right next to Amanda, and then I was like, take this. Here's how the frame overlay utility on a small HDD monitor works.
On the monitor.
And they just took it and ran with it. And I didn't, then we could like figure out the next shot or changing lighting. So that was a really fun like partnership between the art department and camera department.
Yeah, and honestly, shout out to David that day, who was actually brought in as a like PA. But as soon as he saw the opportunities and the needs in y'all's world, like he just jumped in and he learned how to use the overlay like functionality. And honestly, he was a major part of the speed of the day.
100%. Couldn't have done it without Janae and David for sure. They were super.
And that's
helpful.
where like sometimes extra monitors for art department or the gaffer is like totally worthwhile.
Always
Let
a
them do
monitor
their
for art department,
job.
please.
Yeah, the first swap we did, I like left set. I was like, oh, it's gonna be a minute. I'm gonna go grab a snack.
Yeah.
And I came back and everybody's like, all right, where's the director? Are we ready? And I was like, oh my gosh, like we're cooking now. Let's do it.
Because how many times would you say that we swapped out pans?
Oh my goodness, I don't even know. Like 20, 30 times.
Yeah, I think it had to have been upwards of 30.
Yeah.
Yeah. And somehow,
And my worst nightmare is for people to say, we're waiting on art. So it was like, no, we gotta go.
no, we were not waiting on art at any point. So that was amazing. So another major part of virtual production, which is always a challenge, is lighting it so that the two worlds seamlessly blend, and you have sunlight that's motivating the key on the actor and all these things, but you still have a tabletop piece, which means everything has to be true to color and all that. So we had some unique challenges here for Nathan Thompson, our DP. So talk a little bit about, we have your lighting grid here, which you had actually like drawn up before ever even getting to set. So tell us a little bit about what led you to, this sort of setup, and how true did you stay to that?
Stayed decently true to that. I mean, in virtual production, I think one of my main takeaways from my experience has been don't just light with the wall. Like a lot of times, most of the time, the wall is not bright enough to light your scene. If it's a very like low lit, like sunset or something scene, hey, it may be perfect, but most of the time I like to have a lot of lights in place. Again, to extend reality, that's what we're doing. We're taking the reality on the wall and we're extending it into the real world. And of course, I do quite a bit of like tabletop product stuff, and it's a lot of pressure to make sure that like that product looks the absolute best that it can. Luckily, these pans had a matte finish. So like we had a really big key light setup on camera left side that gave a really nice like shape to the pans. And luckily the matte finish kind of like smoothed that out, so it wasn't like too crazy. And then we had a lot of flags around that really large key light to make sure that no spill was getting onto the wall, because once all that light spills onto the wall, then like you're already dealing with a wall that sometimes the contrast levels are hard to dial in. Your blacks aren't dark enough. Sometimes your whites are too bright and you're losing detail. So we want to really match the contrast on the wall with the contrast in the real world, which I use false color for on monitors a lot. But you really don't want stray light to spill onto the screen as much as possible. So while we were adding a lot of light, we were also trying to control light. One thing that was on the lighting plot, I also like to backlight a lot, because working with Justin, our stage operator, you can move the sun in the Unreal environment. So we found the ideal position for the sun, and then we wanted backlight to really separate the talent from the virtual scene. So and then we also, shooting cars, shooting things that are reflective, a lot of times they don't really like accept light necessarily. They only reflect light. So one big change was that instead of these two lights and frames that I was thinking of having as bounces in the front, we ended up putting like all 8 Astera tubes right under the pans in front of the table, and then put like an 8x8 muslin, I think, in front, again, to just so that they would reflect the white cloth and just give it like a nice ambience and shape. So
Yeah, that actually was a bigger adjustment. We were talking about that earlier. I kind of forgot about that one.
We did that the morning of, right?
We did that the
That's
morning
right,
of,
yeah.
because the night before when we were pre-lighting, it was like the blue pan is just not taking the light.
Right.
So we ended up building this fort. Big shout out there to Skylar,
Yeah, totally.
who helps run our studio's operations. But he just jumped in and actually just took control of the Astera tubes and matched color and all that kind of stuff. Like we would reset, and I'd be like, did we remember to? And like Skylar was on it every time with the color changes and everything.
Because then every time Justin would change the material color in the virtual world, then Skylar would change the Astera tube color.
Yep.
So that most of the lighting, we didn't change color. Like the wall and the reflectance from the wall kind of made it feel like the world changed color.
Yep.
So we kept all the other lights like pretty neutral. But the front lights for our foreground, we did want to have some like color spill. So we matched every color of the wall and the pans, also on the Astera tubes.
Yeah, yeah, and it was. It turned out to be absolutely beautiful. But yeah, those little last minute changes are kind of those things you almost forget about. But it was actually pretty crucial to the believability of the whole world, I think. I feel like I had another lighting question. Oh yeah, no, I wanted to shout out Patrick Wilson, who was our grip and gaff on all this. Who put up a million flags to keep all that all that light off the wall. But yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the robotic elements here and what the challenges and some of the like finer points of motion control here, like what that afforded us? Or do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, let me talk a little bit about the robot, which is the motorized precision Colossus robot. It's huge. You have to like rope off the area to make sure that no one's around it if you're gonna move, because it's very dangerous. And on this shoot, it was moving very fast. So another shout out to Justin, in pre-pro, we shot on the Venice 2 Master Anamorphics, and in pre-pro, Justin, he mapped every lens so that the background looks correct, no matter what lens we're on. We shot this on one lens, I believe.
Yeah, is it the 50?
50, I think.
Yeah.
We shot this on one lens. But it's amazing that like Justin is doing like all his due diligence to make sure that all the software is set up and going to set us up for success. So one of the main challenges was that the robot was moving so fast that even though y'all have really good processing power, there was a little bit of a delay and a catch up where the robot would move in and then the wall would land. So for that, we really just had to dial in the speed so that they landed at the same time. And then in post, you guys worked your magic and did speed ramps and things like that. So
yeah, and for those that maybe haven't done a ton of virtual production, there is typically you map lenses based on positioning in the room, and we have a Stipe system that just knows where the camera is in the room. It's a little different from what I understand. I'll try to speak to it technically, but I will fail. With the robot, where the robot's actually sending the information to the wall in real time. That's kind of as I understand it, how the camera tracking was working. And so we had to think through a little bit of just how we were going to get past those moments where we wanted to move really fast, because the wall is actually reacting to the space, to what kind of lens, what camera and lens package you have, and where that camera is in space. Like it's adjusting so that the background flexes a little bit and moves like you would see like parallaxing and things like that in the real world. So anyway, that's kind of where that challenge comes from, and it takes a lot of processing power to make that happen.
I believe that'd be like Stipe, which is a star tracker.
Yes.
Star tracker. It's reading reflective dots on the ceiling so that when the camera moves, that reacts in Unreal as well. And then Stipe also has focus motors, so that when that movement is happening, we're keeping the products in focus. And all of that is perfectly programmable and repeatable. Perfectly.
Yeah. No, that was kind of the great thing watching in the edit. I mean, the repeatable moves were like, to a T precise. Like there was no variation with the Colossus or anything. So it was, once I got to see that, I was like, oh, we might have actually pulled this off. So anyway, some of our early conceptualization, we just trying to get this thing, because a unique challenge for this one is it had to be a 30. But you're kind of constrained to a certain time that different moves have to take. So it took a lot of pre-visualization to be like, okay, telling our robot up, like this move has to take 2 seconds. This move has to, take 1 second. We'll ramp this one, so don't worry about it. but like knowing precisely how long each move was going to take. So it just took a lot of previs.
Sometimes cooking is more a matter of feeling.
Oh, good.
We may ask each other.
With my voice. So we went through all the moves there, but I guess we had some trouble with this video. But literally just trying to we picked out the track, started doing the VO, and just moving an iPhone around to be like, okay, is this going to work in this amount of time? And so when we actually got everything sort of moving and up on set, we did the actual robot camera moves again to make sure all of this was still going to play.
And then, of course, you have to direct talent to also do her actions just at the right time, which was another parameter to dial in.
Yeah, so this was kind of the second a little bit more fleshed out previs for the scene. But yeah, it was still pretty. I mean, on the day of, we were adjusting because the wall would have to have a certain amount of time to settle, and then we'd have to make sure action was not moving, because I really didn't want you to see. We wanted to speed ramp, but I really didn't want you to see her doing moving, and then you get the sense of the speed ramping in her motion. I wanted to see it in the camera, and that's it. So making sure we were pausing at the right places and all that, it was just a lot of fun for all. Yeah. So next slide. Yeah. So there you go. We have Cody there in the left. Just all of us admiring his beautiful work, because I mean, creating an Unreal scene is exceptionally difficult, and I think this was y'all's first time making an Unreal scene that was going to be filmed practically. Yeah. So, I mean, just the intuition he had with the depth, with placing the kitchen a little higher than the rest of the room, because that's the hardest thing. You can make it work in art, but trying to blend those two worlds if you can see the seam, and trying to make two elements, if it's like a hardwood floor and you're trying to make this match this, is very difficult perspective-wise. So some things that you can help yourself out with is changing the height if you don't have a dramatic border in art. So amazing job honestly for them. They made this look as real as I think I've ever seen an Unreal scene in a world and a physical world come together. So we just have some kind of shoot day things, or is this jarring any memories for you guys of what it was like the day of? Because it's a little bit of a blur for me.
Yeah, I mean, it was just being quick and making, like you said, the robot moving around. Sometimes we had to scoot the rug back and squish it up against the wall and make sure little things weren't showing here and there. But
yeah, we didn't have a full floor extension.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that Amanda was always had her eye on was, okay, in this angle, and as we were setting the camera height, we're like, okay, the camera needs to go from here to here. Mm-hmm. But here we see over the edge and we see the floor and we see the seam of the wall, so we can't do that.
Yep.
Right.
So can Amanda come save the day?
Yeah. And then you just popping the shelf up on Apple boxes, taking it down, popping it up, taking it down, depending on where the robot was at. So just little tiny adjustments on the day. Yeah.
And Kirk, the owner of Gear 7 / Robot Tech, did an incredible job of helping us hide those seams with some of the moves and everything, because there were just little moments that it was you can just see a little bit over the edge there. So, but yeah, the art played a huge role in just shifting things around and making sure the perspective felt right, but still covered a lot of those seams and made sure you didn't really feel that transition to the real world from Unreal. Kind of keep going through some highlights from the day.
It was also kind of fun to get Callie in there with her food.
Yes.
She obviously amazing food stylist. She had all sorts of food prepped, but it was interesting to see it prepped in the kitchen and then bringing it on set. The lights kind of changed some of the colors of the food.
Yep.
So she was bringing me red peppers to put on the set, and every time she'd bring them in, they'd turn orange. And she's like, "This was just red. I swear, I'm gonna go get you new ones." And she came back and she said, "They were just red." It was a fun little oh, they are red peppers. They just look orange in this light.
Yeah, it was like a magic trick. We kept bringing it in and out of the light, and it was
wait, what is happening here?
So the things you just can't prepare for. But yeah, I mean, honestly, the day, I feel like we had almost 4 days of prep. 1 day pre-light and then 2 days of just calibrating everything from the lighting to the robot moves, the Unreal World, all that kind of stuff. And so I feel like it was, honestly, for me, it was probably the smoothest day I could have possibly imagined.
Yeah, because I think on our pre-light day, I walked into an already pre-lit set.
Right. Yeah.
Which is wild. So yeah, shout out to Patrick Wilson for that. He really went for it. And yeah, that's crazy that your pre-light day, you're actually not pre-lighting because it's already done. So.
And yeah, I mean, we actually another, I want to make sure I get his name right. Eric Williams was our AD on the day, and he was a massive reason why we stayed ahead of schedule all day. And I mean, he was on top of it from the jump. I think I went to the bathroom one time for I don't know, it was probably a minute, and I came back in the rooms because I thought I had plenty of time, and he met me at the door and was like, okay, here's where we're at. And I was like, great, let's do this.
We shot this pretty much in order, right?
Yeah, and he changed up he kept honestly a great AD. I'm still just honestly just blown away at how much value and that brought to the set, because I just it's not a world that I've been super familiar with in my career, having an AD like that, just constantly making you think through the finer details. And we went through, I think, 3 versions of the shot list where we finally landed on this is how we need to approach it. And Eric got all the credit for that, and again was the reason I think we were ahead all day. And ultimately got to just play around for an hour at the end. We got to go through some. We actually did change the lens for that, didn't we?
Yeah.
We did the 75 and did some macro stuff.
That was us just playing around.
It was just I
didn't know.
We had 3 shots that we thought would be really cool if we had time, but in no way thought we'd have time, so we didn't tell anybody. I do remember that from the set. You guys were okay, so that's it, right?
Yeah.
We're done. We were yeah, now we can do our extra shots. And it was what extra shots? They weren't on the shot list. So just fun surprises for everyone involved.
Yeah, for that, Quinn and Ratani, they swapped out the rear and front elements of the Master Anamorphics to add the special flare optics.
Yeah.
And then we got kind of funky with some different close-ups and diopters. And yeah, I mean, shooting with pans, you always want that shot of the food flying up in the air. I don't know. At least I did.
You got to have it.
We got it. It didn't make the spot, but
no,
maybe there'll be a 15.
Yeah. Well, we'll do something with it. We'll do something. We'll put the extra materials somewhere. But yeah, I actually wanted to go back to that for a second. I wanted to talk through camera and lens package choice, because it's pretty crucial that you blend these worlds in every way possible. And you talked about the role that anamorphics could play in that. And I had not been thinking at all about anamorphics for this spot, but I mean, that's my love language. So as soon as you said, I was I don't need a reason, just do it. But go ahead and talk us through a little bit.
Usually
of that.
on virtual production, I try not to shoot on the cleanest lenses, because it's nice. I feel like filtration and lenses with a little character can soften things up. I mean, it's an electronic wall. It's fake. So if you can add some extra layers of diffusion to kind of blend everything together, I usually do that. But at the same time, it's a product spot. This is modern pans. I don't want to go too vintage or weird. So I thought the Master Anamorphics were kind of a nice mix of clean, but also having some character, maybe can flare a little bit and respond a little bit to some of the atmospheric lighting and things like that. And then also the widescreen aspect ratio, we needed to hide the floor most of the time. So I was well, it's better to have a thinner frame that's longer rather than a tall frame that's just gonna be more hiding of the top seam and the bottom seam, basically. And then we shot Venice 2 because I knew that we'd probably be pushing in and reframing. And then just having the 8K, negative just gives you so much flexibility in post. So that was kind of saving our ass there.
Yeah. And we got our anamorphic cut too. We made it work. That was the one thing that we only needed a 16:9. And so the whole day was well, it's cool. It's in the guides. And then it was just well, but we got to see if we can get the anamorphic. I just want, just for me, I want to know if we can get this, if we can actually have that as a cut. And it actually, it all worked out. So here's a little shoot day BTS here from Mr. Nathan Thompson.
Yeah, and this is a couple things that you can see in this. We did have the ceiling on that we use sometimes to add color cast to things, but also a lot of times we were just adding a black square above us. It's oh, we need a flag, overhead. We don't want those reflections. So Justin would just add a black solid over. You know, I mean, that's really nice to be able to either add like, you can light in the scene, but also a lot of times it's about taking away. And then also we had like a 12 or 16 foot menace arm with a light matte. Spectrum 4 is always your friend in this, so that we could still get a wide shot, but have that key light like perfectly placed for talent. And
Yeah, and props to you, because we didn't have to really move in lighting at all the tighter we got. So that's quite an accomplishment in itself.
it's nice to like light a scene and then just let it be if possible. And most of the time, I mean, we were flying in some bounces every now and then, but most of the time we just
Some specials for flares, yeah.
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 Oh yeah. We had like some of the light bridge CRLS reflectors in the background that we were trying to flare the lens out, and you know, just try to get weird and get creative. That's always fun.
That sound of that robot, and it's the whole day just going.
Yeah.
So eerie.
And you know, the only thing we didn't get quite right is your iPhone settings here. There's some flicker. Right there, I
Whoops.
think you might notice.
Yeah. Sorry, my phone wasn't gen locked to the system.
We'll get that right next time we do BTS. But yeah, so from there we got it into the cut, and my nerves were, I mean, pretty on edge, because I was like, we made small timing adjustments on the day. I was like, is this still going to be a 30? So I was just kind of getting this in to rough out the timing, and so I think that's what this is. This is just V1.
Sometimes
Where we were doing hard cuts. Yes, lens flare.
Sometimes we're just feeling a certain dish. You're in just the right mood.
So this was all just with hard cuts.
But no matter what food you're feeling, you can always have the feeling of quality cookware made with 100% non-toxic materials. Cookware that is truly non-stick, easy to use, and complements your style. Caraway, clean cooking, good looking.
So it was like, okay, we have a 30. We know we have that. And you'll notice there was one little shot that just went up into the wall and showed you absolutely nothing. That is because Knitted City, along with their Unreal Environment skills, were kind enough to give us a little more work here and gave us a floating virtual pan shot that hadn't quite been infused in it just yet. But another thing early in the creative that we started to think through is how we would make these transitions, because hard cuts are cool. But just to get a little more, I don't know, just a little more extra texture out of all these different colors that we're going to play, we thought it'd be really interesting to use a dividing line effect that would essentially just take you like it do wipes, or could stay in the center and would kind of live and breathe in the scene, and would take you between the different colors in the different world. And it would just feel a little more kinetic, because I don't know, there was something a little chaotic about the feeling of just hard cuts. It was just kind of, you're reorienting yourself. But if you have something that's kind of almost guiding you through these different spaces you're about to occupy, it can cover up a lot of transitions and continuity that our talent simply could not be as in perfect continuity as the pans. So a way to get through that is to almost give the sense of a time lapse with these wipes and make it seem like there's a progression, even though the physical elements of the scene are staying the same. So we're about to show the final. Do you have anything? Is there anything else? Which we're still like, we have a few small tweaks that we're making, but this is at least a candidate for final export. It's like, you know, everybody in here knows final V3, final V4. So we're going to enter that process now. But yeah, any final thoughts before we just take a look?
You proved me wrong. It's pretty much a one.
Well, I mean, just never question me again. No, I sincerely, like, even the day of when it was working, I was like, we've got to shoot. I'm so glad we shot extra stuff, because I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have to bail out of this. Like, I don't think it's gonna work. But yeah, here we are. Do I have to edit again? I think I have to play.
Sometimes cooking is more a matter of feeling. Sometimes we're just feeling a certain dish. You're in just the right mood for a certain meal. But no matter what food you're feeling, you can always have the feeling of quality cookware made with 100% non-toxic materials. Cookware that is truly non-stick, easy to use, and complements your style. Caraway, clean cooking, good looking.
And there you have it. So yeah, big shouts out to the whole team that was there that day. Honestly, like, still to this day, like, I mean, obviously only been like a month and a half later, but this was probably my favorite shoot of my entire career. Like, everyone, for how much technicality and craziness like it felt like we all had to keep up with. It felt like we all had enough like support, enough time. Everyone was very calm and relaxed. Like I mean, it just felt like we were kind of playing. And I don't know that I've really had that feeling on a set. So yeah, that was a wonderful time. So
Yeah. It was amazing that, you know, Kirk owns the company and I'm sure has a million things going on in terms of running a business. And I just love that he is as technical as he is and made like every single programmed move like so easy. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, when I got the call for this, told it was going to be a Gear 7 on the wall with the robot, I was like, count me in. I want to play. LED walls are the future. Like anytime I can work on them. We'd actually just worked on one like a couple days before this shoot, and I had like a kid's desk, and it was just like a still shot. It was so boring. So I'm like, that was exciting to me. It was really, really fun to watch it all play out. So.
yeah, Kirk was back there to add to the play element. He has figured out how to hook up the robot to a PlayStation controller, and that's how he's programming moves. So he's just sitting over there.
He makes it look so easy.
It was great. So yeah, we have some questions. We're gonna kick it to Q&A, but this was one that kind of came in early. What is the best piece of advice for virtual production shoots? I mean, we've gone through some of the elements, but are there some things that emerge in your mind as you hear that question? You know, thinking through like just those barriers to entry, those things that you didn't realize were going to be the challenges when you got into virtual production. I'm happy to take the first knock on it, but if something comes to mind.
It's all about pre-production.
Yes.
You know, pre-production and pre-lighting. Like the idea of stepping into a virtual production shoot day of and lighting it is, you're gonna run into issues. And I mean, the thing that I've found is also every virtual production stage is different. So you really, like the main thing for me is the relationship between the director of photography and the Unreal operator or the stage operator. Like that's like as important as your relationship with the first AC. That's as important as your relationship with the gaffer. Like it's another newer, more intense layer of gaffing basically, or like you're basically live color grading kind of with this person. So, and it's just all this new terminology, and you know, it's like, okay, this light is at 3200 Kelvin. Well, okay, let's make our virtual lights at 3200 Kelvin. But in Unreal, it doesn't use 3200 Kelvin. It's some other value. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of like remapping everything you've learned about cameras and cinematography. You're remapping it to make sense in the virtual world, which is completely different. So that's my biggest takeaway, is build a relationship with the person running Unreal and just dive in with them.
Yeah, I was going to say all that. I guess always having options is a huge piece, but just being aware of like where the seam is on these walls and what you can use as a play to like hide it and make it feel more realistic. Having kind of like a background piece, a middle ground piece, and a foreground piece is really helpful to sell it. If you're seeing wide enough, you know, what do you need to cover the ground, sand or rug or whatever it is. But, and then in this case, like I said, just having options of something that might soak up the light that we were trying to change.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Yeah, we spoke to that a little bit, but yeah, that was the other thing. I remember we were talking, I was like, the thing is, the world is going to change, but your world can't. So figure that out.
And in some cases it would be like paint 6 shelves.
Yes, exactly.
Different colors and whatever. But I mean, we just truly made it work with the one that we had and our one chrome light and our one plant. And so having tons of options. And then I think the other big thing for these walls is, especially in this case, is keeping it slightly minimal. Like don't go crazy because you can kind of mess it up if you go too much, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me has always been like, I just thought when you showed up on a stage like this, like, yeah, you're lit. Like there's just, you know, and it's all going to work and you can just transport everyone wherever you want. But art direction lighting is just like, I mean, always just an indispensable part of any process, as I've found out. And we mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I mean, having that that art to really bring your eye forward, and so that you're not just trying to blend a person in a world. That's the biggest thing, is you just can't skimp on art direction. So Amanda will be taking your calls and requests soon. But yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that I've taken away. And just honestly, preparation. You save a lot of time in post, but you spend that, a lot of it in pre-production then. And that's where having a great producer, shout out to Shay Jones, who made all this work, even amongst having her car stolen and crazy things in her life. As she had just moved from Atlanta, she still managed to produce the mess out of this shoot. So, that is, I believe that brings us to Q&A. And we're going to have a microphone that's going to travel around the room in just a second. But I think before we do that, we have one online question already. And that is, how do you get involved in virtual production with no experience? Like, how do you get on set initially? Any advice there?
I mean, no experience is a starting point. So it's all about networking and meeting and starting from the bottom. Maybe you start as a PA, or maybe you start as an intern at a company, I feel like to succeed in this industry, it has to be your life. You kind of have to be all in, because it'll eat you alive. So you're either all in or not. So kind of make that decision and figure it out and start building those relationships.
Yeah, I mean, maybe come to Directors and Donuts. I mean, we tend to take tours of ARC studios afterwards, and you get to know some people. So I don't know.
Or another avenue could be like for folks who maybe don't have set experience, to just learn the software. I'm sure like Knitted City and their masters, and I'm sure some of the software I imagine is fairly accessible. I know Blender is free. DaVinci Resolve has free versions. If you have a computer, that can be an entry point, and maybe you're not on set, but hey, you guys were on set. Like you were so important to have there.
Yep.
And it was amazing to see that virtual world. So the post-production worlds and the real production worlds are just becoming like more and more intertwined. Yep. And so that could also be a route.
Yeah, the demand is only going to go up for Unreal artists and for people who can make those worlds and stuff. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, or for robots to make them for us and just put us out of work. So.
Yeah. In a few years, we'll just put we'll put the treatment into Chat GPT, and then it'll just do what we wanted it to do. So, all right. Do we want to take the mic around the room? Brooke is going to help us out there. Tanner, we got a hand over there. As we used to say in the church world, I see that hand.
Really cool spot. It was awesome to work out. I was curious. I've not tried doing match cuts before in that way, with the overlay on set. That seems like the hardest part. I mean, a lot of this is very challenging, but that seems like such a great thing, especially with the robot. Can you talk a little bit more just about what matching those frames took, and especially with so many different possibilities? I mean, it was the critical part of every single shot.
Yeah.
It seems very challenging. Just tell us a little bit more.
I mean, I think at first we didn't always do it at one angle at first. At first we were kind of like, okay, for this shot, we'll match them like this.
Right.
And then for this shot, we'll match them like this. And then we decided, no, it's easiest to like see all the edges and like where the handle is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And like he mentioned, he taught me how to do the overlay over the live view, and literally with my little white gloves to make sure I didn't get fingerprints on anything. It was a matter of just like turning things ever just so, making sure they're in the right spot, and then we did okay.
I mean,
move on.
there's a feature on the frame overlay on small HD monitors that it'll like flash it on and off. So we were adjusting the opacity and like, and then it would flash it on and off, and you could figure out, oh, this pan's a little off.
And by our 30th switch, like we were just,
I mean,
it was it goes right there. I don't even have to look.
The robot, if we hadn't had the robot, then it would have been like, okay, let's get a tripod. Let's like mark the feet.
Right.
Let's match let's measure the height, and let's But with the robot, we knew we could go to like the exact
Yeah.
position every single time.
Yeah.
And then we just put the pans in that position every time. So
Yeah.
Which I think we saw this too late, and I don't even think I shared it with y'all, but Maddie in our Gear 7 group thread shared a video where someone had done something similar with a kitchen piece with Moco, and they had used blacklight pins. And they had like surrounded little pieces like that they had on the table, and they had drawn it so that it would disappear if you didn't have blacklight, but they would bring a blacklight in to make sure that something had matched. And I was like,
That's a good way to do things.
that would have been
for
like
sure.
next level. But I don't know that it actually would
I
have
think
helped
this
us.
is next level doing
Yes.
the overlay.
I don't know that would have like actually helped us because the handles and stuff would have
Right.
been above. So like it actually probably wouldn't have been that great of a guide for this piece.
For the background pieces, maybe a little bit, but
Maybe,
even
yeah.
then, she just kind of like dropped them right on top. So
yeah.
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 Have you guys done a cost analysis between pretty much a birth production LED wall versus like a blue screen and then kind of pumping in Unreal Engine through like the monitor into the blue screen doing it that way?
We have looked at that. I am not privy to how that landed. I can't speak to that with any level of specificity, but I know that we've looked, and I mean, for the most part, what you really gain is the pre-visualization for a lot of clients, and for just even for myself, like as a director, to be able to see how things are going to play, how they're going to look. That's been more the advantage than the cost. I think they end up being in a similar vein depending on what you're doing. It takes a lot of the post-production costs and moves it into pre. I think there are some ways that it has been more cost effective just because you do have a better reference for what's going to happen. That means you're not going to have to do a bunch of revisions based on unforeseen things with the background. So I can't necessarily speak to it with specificity, but I believe we've done some analyses on that, and I might have to get something more specific. But that was a good question. Have you like looked into that much, or?
I haven't really gone there. No.
I have no idea.
And then the second part too would be, are you guys having any limitations with frame rate? Are you guys still stuck at like 24 frames and 30 frames per second, or can you push it to like 60 and 120?
So I have shot 48 and 60, and that kind of speaks to the differences of what studio you're in. Every studio is different. Every studio has different processors. I know that there's like Brompton processors I've been learning more about, have some like either really interesting features right now or coming up. But the higher end processors are at least starting to allow you to be able to shoot at higher frame rates. So far when I've done that, it's been basically through shooting at like 24 frames per second at a 144 degree shutter. And then you just shoot, if you shoot at 48, then you double your shutter, which goes to 288, which is a slower shutter. And then if you go to 60, then I think you go to a 360 shutter, which is really slow. And so you introduce motion blur, but then you're shooting at a higher frame rate. So sometimes it's minimized. So I've shot up to 60 with no problems and no like strobing or anything like that. It might be a little different here. I'd honestly have to defer to Justin because you all use Disguise software, which you gen lock the camera and basically you just tell the software, like you're telling the software what the camera is shooting at, and it's gen locked to the system. I think on this shoot, gen lock was being a little funky maybe, but normally you could gen lock the camera to the system and then set your camera at whatever you want, and then just in Disguise be like, here's what the camera is, and it should regulate everything for what the camera is.
Yeah, I know we have 48 capability here, and then I've asked about 60 before, and Justin has given me a yes. And so like I'm guessing there's something technical. I don't know that there are some concessions there, probably as Nathan acknowledged. But yes, you can do off-speed stuff, and it just depends on what the setup is. That's a good question. We have an online one. If nobody else in here has one, I want to prioritize the live audience if anybody has anything. But what do you see the future of virtual production looking like?
I mean, there's a lot of like new technology that are going to be or are making things amazing, like higher frame rates, being able to shoot with multiple cameras at once, where through shutter sync, one camera sees one thing and the other camera, like to your eye, it just looks like 2 frames overlaid, but to each camera they see independent frames. And this was there was a setup at NAB. Disguise had a setup at NAB where they were shooting multicam, and each camera was seeing something different, which is pretty amazing. You could shoot one camera on a tight shot, seeing the virtual world. On another camera, could be on a wide shot on a green screen. And it's really crazy that even on the green screen shot, say it's a green screen and tracking markers, this camera won't see the green reflected. Say you had a car there, it doesn't even see the green reflected in the car because of the shutter sync.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Okay.
So multicam on a volume is like a reality if you have the right processors and software that can, make it all real.
Yeah.
So.
And then there's the idea of like set extension, which is being developed, where you can essentially make that image as big as you want. And I still don't, fully understand technically how all that works. So Nathan's answer is going to be a lot more specific than mine, but that's kind of an exciting thing we're looking into is, I don't know that anybody's going to be shooting a car interior, on a location in 5 years. I think the tech is so good for something like that to be on the wall, but I actually think there's a world where running footage will also be something that you can do quite a bit of. And I think just for brands and agencies to know that they can, put their products in all these different spaces that might, that they don't have to fly to. And honestly, if you're in Nashville and it's July, the last thing you want to do is shoot anything outdoors ever. So like, having an air conditioned studio that can do those things for you, I would imagine that's going to open up a lot of possibilities for those who are on the forefront of virtual production in whatever capacity. Amanda, do you have anything for that?
I just think it's important to keep being on these virtual shoots because I truly think it's the future. I'm not for our department. I feel lucky that we still have a part in it, and it might be a little bit smaller. I might not need to build an entire set, but it's really important to be involved in these and like understand how they're working and understand how the technology is working with what you're physically doing. So, it's definitely the future for sure.
I mean, I think our department is more important than ever.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, the least interesting thing is like shooting someone just on the wall.
Right.
Yeah.
If you can like fool people into thinking that it's a real world, like to me, that's when it gets interesting. There's also like software out there that can do augmented reality where there's like foreground overlays in real time, which is really interesting. So there's tons of stuff coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited about it. It's fun to work on those walls.
Nice. All right, we got time for one more. If anybody in the room has anything, we'll go to the room. If not, we have one more online. Going once, going twice. All right. Dream idea to shoot within virtual production. Dream idea.
I mean, I don't know. That's hard to say.
Idea. I don't know.
I mean, I did one shoot where the thing that I love about virtual production is it does like push you to dream.
Yes.
Like it does like push you into a new frame of mind where you're like, where things that weren't possible before really could be possible. So like I did a shoot, where we, did wire work and like a little girl jumped out of a school bus, sort of a magic school bus type of a thing, jumped out of a school bus and is flying through space. And,
I wish I was on that one. That looks cool.
Initially we were just going to do a car shoot. We're like, oh, okay. We could have a jib and we could do all these moves on a car that, that would be really hard to do with a process trailer. So we were like, okay, let's do a car shoot. And we're like, what are we doing? Like, you can go anywhere. Why just do a car shoot? And so we're like, okay, let's go to space. And that was a challenge, and we learned a lot from it. And we learned that we should have done safety takes on green screen because wire removal with 1 million stars in the sky is really, really hard. So that was like problematic and was like a headache for VFX to do the wire removal. And so honestly, that was one example where we were like, we either shouldn't have shot it with like the live background, or we at least should have got like a safety on green as well.
Yeah.
So it's all virtual production isn't the solution for everything.
Yeah.
And so it's fun to learn what it is good for and what it isn't good for.
Yeah. I love a challenge, like something that doesn't exist and I'm being asked to make is like a daily thing for me.
Yeah.
But in this world, it really like goes to the next level of what we can make happen. So to me, it's just exciting to know what the challenges might be, you know, presenting me a living room that is floating in space and doesn't exist. Like,
Yeah.
okay, now solve that problem is a dream to me, because the bigger the challenge, the more I'm like, let's bring it on.
we could, I mean, I saw one spot that gave me a lot of ideas where a family's just sitting in a living room, and then all of a sudden the world spins and all the art like goes airborne. And like,
Upside down.
you know, with like robotics and virtual production, like spinning the world actually isn't even hard.
Yeah.
You know, having all the art move in sync with it would be really tough.
Yeah.
But it's
It
pretty
just
wild.
makes you think out of the box.
Yeah, one of the things I really want to try is, so another layer of integration would be lighting. Like at NAB, I was just at NAB in Vegas, and like, you know, all these technology advancements, lighting companies are trying to sort of catch up with the advancements that the LED panel technology. So a KinoFlow has a new light that will take a video signal. And so you could build a whole wall of a much brighter light fixture that has, like, you could put a fire on it or something, or you could put police lights on it, and the effect is way more dynamic than just like a sky panel, like blinking red and black. Like, you know, your lights are actually moving across the wall in space, and it's so much more dynamic. And like, so they had a setup where you see the screen and you see the effect, and the fire effect and the police lights effect were just so much more like realistic. So I'm really interested in like where we can go next, integrating lighting into the conversation, so that like maybe you're controlling the lighting as well from Unreal, and syncing everything so that when you move the sun in the Unreal environment, it affects like your sky panels or whatever. So that's another layer.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, because it makes me think of just time-lapse effects, and like especially with motion control that can DMX to your different lighting. Like you can literally take people from, you know, night to day or whatever it is. Like I just think about transitions and what that can give you in terms of storytelling. So that's, I mean, I don't know that I have a specific project, but it just that's the next thing I would like to try to do, is more of the lighting cues and just kind of fooling with what that can do in terms of just bending time when you have something either faster or slower, and then a subject you can film in real time that is kind of unaffected by that, where you don't have to roto them out or anything like that. So that's what I think about. But thank you all so much for being here. We're going to be hanging out here for a little while. But one thing we can do after this is you actually can walk over to ARC Studios where we shot this. Typically, we have a camera tracking set up like there where we can kind of demo it. We have fortunately, we have a client shoot coming up in the next few days, so we're setting up for that right now. So we don't have the demo, but you're welcome to still go over there and tour and hang out. And yeah, we'll just kind of be here hanging around. So thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Great.